Okay. Okay. Yes,
Okay.
it's working.
All right. Okay, I'll, you want me to mute it or just leave it on? Okay, so she'll introduce you and then you'll.
Very good. Ma'am? Sure.
North Carolina land,
Yes, ma'am.
with it during the Revolutionary time, does that imply or confirm that it was because of the Revolution?
No, no, you could be just Nobody in North Carolina and get a land grant during the Revolution. North Carolina gave bounty land to its Revolutionary War veterans in the westernmost part of North Carolina, a place they call Tennessee. And there are three different indexes.
Only in Tennessee?
Yeah, there's three different indexes to that. One is the North Carolina Archives, and we have it at microfilm at Wallace. The national government has an index, and the state of Tennessee has an index, and I think we've got that too, of the Revolutionary War bounty grants in Tennessee. Now, just because you got a bounty grant in Tennessee does not necessarily mean you moved there after the war for any appreciable length of time. There's a really good book by Lloyd Boxtruck, and it's on the Revolutionary War bounty lands for the whole country, all 9 states that gave them, including Tennessee. And that's where you need to start when you're looking for somebody getting that.
He was very entertaining and knowledgeable.
Thank you. Also, if you come to Wallace, we've got the Revolutionary War accounts and vouchers for North Carolina. And that is the best source for finding information on Revolutionary War service in North Carolina, or by North Carolina troops, rather. And it's huge,
Yeah.
but well indexed and easy to use.
They were at the archives. They were very helpful. Accommodated the young.
Well, that is one of the nice things about the North Carolina archives. They hire these young people right out of college, and within a few years, they're all gone. They've gotten another job somewhere else in the state that pays better, or private sector or whatever. But what that means is they're constantly bringing in new people, and you don't end up with a bunch of people who have nowhere to go, who treat the public with less deference than the public deserves. I've known some institutions like that too. Yeah.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to BBCom Memorial Library. Thank you so much for joining us today for our final installment of our genealogy research series presented by Robert Davis, who is Senior Professor of History at Wallace State Community College. I also would like to thank Don and Kim Ward for sponsoring this program. Generous contributions from people like the Wards make programming like what you are enjoying today possible. Also, a special reminder for the YouTube live viewers, please remember if you have any questions, please type them on the comment section. Professor Davis, thank you for being with us once again to share your genealogy knowledge. And now I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Okay. Today's program is on doing genealogical research on a computer. Now, there are many aspects of this, people who know more about it than I do, but I do want to touch on all the as many different ways that we use computers in our family history as I can, and refer you to where you might go for more information. Again, a brief commercial about our program at Wallace State in Huntsville, Alabama. If you'd like to be on our electronic mailing list, here's my address. Send me an email and I will put you on it. Okay. Now, computers and genealogy can be overwhelming. It really can. But on the other hand, some people get so involved in the computer technology that they sort of leave the genealogy behind and just, get into the cutting edge of uh, the science, if you would. It is hard to explain in a presentation like this because there will always be very different levels of expertise. There'll be people who are basically beginners and people who have very sophisticated knowledge. If you want to get into the cutting edge of computer technology in research, every year in Salt Lake, there's a huge conference called RootsTech. And it's a great way to learn about the latest things in computers and genealogy, the latest computer technology, and share these adventure, if you would, with a lot of very nice people from all over the country. And of course, while you're in Salt Lake, you can also do research at the big LDS library in Salt Lake, the largest genealogical library in the world. Now, there are other big genealogical conferences that are held across the country, the National Genealogical Society, for example. And that's a good place to go as well to hear really knowledgeable speakers on computers and also to see the technology from the vendors and things of this sort. And again, to meet a lot of interesting people and hear a lot of really good talks. A great way to find books on anything, including computers, is the website Amazon. And ironically, you can buy from Amazon some books electronically, and also you can buy books from used bookstores through Amazon, which I think is kind of amazing all the way around. Now, everybody needs help on the internet with computers. And I've known some people with big fancy degrees and big fancy jobs in computers who email me with their questions about genealogy and computers. Okay, the simplest way I find for solving problems on computers is to go to Google or your other favorite search site and simply type in my question and hit enter. Invariably, Google will hit some sites where people have had the same problem. They've solved the problem and they can explain it to me in terms I can understand to solve the problem. And this is not just for genealogy, but this is also for computers and just about everything else, including your love life, for example. Okay, there are many groups on the internet, and a good search engine like Google will help you find them. You want to do Italian research, you want to do research on cowboys, you want to do your ancestor worked for the railroad, you're trying to understand the 1950 federal census. There are all these groups out there, and many of them are free, who will be happy to share information with you. Just Google your problem and then see what comes up. Now, by the way, if you get, say, 600 hits or 1,000 hits or something like that, don't be intimidated. First off, you only need the hits that solve your problem. Now, in my case, once I did a book on Andersonville Confederate Prison, and I typed in the words in Google, Andersonville and escape, and I got hundreds and hundreds of hits. And so I said, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit here all evening, if it takes it, and go through every one of them. I was done in 30 minutes because you quickly realize, just looking at the list that Google produces for you, sites you don't need to go to, you don't want to go to, you've already been to, etc. So whittling down several hundred hits is very quick. In fact, usually in Google, after 3 or 4 pages of this, Google puts a message across. Now, we could do this all day if you want, but we don't have anything more really to show you haven't already seen. Okay, so as they say, don't be confused about that. Now, let's see. Books on all aspects of genealogy computer programs are out there to help you. Let's say that you bought the computer program Legacy. There are books out there on Legacy and how to use it. Now, of course, Legacy comes with a very good instruction manual to begin with, but if you need something more, then there are books out there put out by people who are not associated with the company. People like you and me who work with the company or have worked with the product on that. Same thing, even Google has a genealogy book. Google your family tree. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon. Okay, and of course, nothing beats having someone who knows what they're doing there with you physically to show you how it works on computers. And as the world seems to be more and more computer oriented and computers get more and more complicated, that oddly enough, human experience becomes even more valuable. Okay, now, Legacy Tree, which is a genealogy database, a subscription one, is really good for hiring genealogy experts. And I don't necessarily mean with your computer. Let's say you have a New York City problem, they can steer you to New York City genealogists who might be able to help you. Or you're researching a Chinese family in San Francisco. Well, there's experts for that as well. And as you will learn in doing your genealogy, hiring someone to do research for you or to share their expertise has become increasingly difficult over time. Uh, I don't really understand that, but it is that way. And then there's a website called Just Answer, which is a collection of advice from experts. And maybe the problem you're having has already been answered, and you can just go to Just Ask, and they'll be happy to share with you what they know. Okay, now, again, pardon me here, but as I say, in any audience, there's always a wide difference in people, a wide difference in people. And so I must say a few words at least about hardware. On everything having to do with computers, and I'm really getting to the point of just about anything else in life, it is good to go online using a program like Google, go online and comparison shop. Now, I know you're thinking things in your mind that you wouldn't want to comparison shop for. Well, that's you, but anyway, that's fine. But anyway, but particularly with computer stuff, there's some sort of consumer reports type of program of file of site on everything on the internet, including what's the best buy in computers, what's the best buys in printers, things of this sort, what's the best buy in this and what's the best buy there. And by and large, these things are based on the experience of people who've actually acquired these computer programs, this computer technology. But always comparison shop on the internet. Okay, now, when I remember when I first started out with computers and genealogy, there was a world of different computer systems and whatever. Now there's basically two. One is Apple Macintosh and the other is PC. And contrary to what you've heard, they are not compatible. And I know what it is to jerry rig a combination of Apple and PC, and it really doesn't work very well. Buy all of your technology, including your cell phone, so that it's all compatible. In other words, buy everything all PC or buy everything all Apple Macintosh. Apple Macintosh makes very fine products. However, most of the people in the world use PC products, and most of the software in the world is written for PC products. And if you're going to share your information, it's probably going to be easier sharing it if you're doing it with PC than with Apple Macintosh. Okay, when you're buying your computer and products, do not worry about obsolescence. Don't worry about that. It's going to be obsolete by the time you get it out of the box. But you have never considered obsolescence when you bought a car. And so think the same way with computers. Anyway, any computer you buy brand new or any system you buy brand new You're going to have years and years with it. And besides all of that, I keep being assured by my computer friends that within a few years, everything we've currently got is going to be a pile of junk. So, and so be it. If somebody's going to offer you a computer, there's usually a good reason. It's kind of like the same reason your father always told you not to buy a used car. Old computers and equipment only get worse, they do not get better. And as far as upgrading computers and such goes, I have never upgraded a computer yet where I didn't come to regret it and wish I hadn't just thrown it away and bought a new system. And no, I'm not being paid to say that. Ma'am?
When they aren't covered any longer, what do you do? If your whole program is on one that will not be covered by the next.
All right, excellent point, ma'am. She's asking, what do you do when your equipment is obsolete and all your material, though, is on the old computer? There are ways of transferring it, and there's lots of really nice computer companies all around, and some of them, all of them actually, for a fee, will transfer all of your data over to your new computer and your new computer system. There's also another important way to get around that problem, and I'm going to talk about it in just a moment. Okay, ISBN ports, which you find on PCs, are wonderful because they allow you to connect all sorts of things to, shoot. Okay. ISBN ports on PCs allow you to connect to all kinds of technology, to printers and to cameras, to recorders, to microphones, to earplugs. You cannot have enough ISBN ports to plug things in. In fact, people have given me these little extensions where you can plug into one ISBN port and then plug 4 different appliances into this gadget with that. Okay, these days, most printers come with scanners. And look at that. You want a scanner that will, of course, scan in color. I don't know that they make any that are not that way. It's a good thing if you can get a printer which allows you to print in black and white or color, not necessarily always in color. That would probably save you a great bit on toner. Anyway, I do not recommend taking pictures with your cell phone. I recommend that you get a camera. And there are many, many good cameras out there and at very reasonable prices, or at least they were until recent times. From a camera, you can either use a cable or you can take out your SIM card and plug it into the computer to transfer your photographs. But I like a camera rather than a cell phone because a camera comes with many more adjustments to it and such, perhaps sometimes too many of them. You can also connect microphones and headsets and things like that to your computer with it. Okay. When you get a camera, make sure that it is a camera that takes good pictures without a flash. Most institutions will not allow you to take flash photography of their documents. So make sure that yours, you can turn off the flash and you can still make good pictures on a black and white camera. Of course, you want a digital camera. Nobody but the Smithsonian is interested in an old film camera anymore, but a digital camera. Nice thing about a digital camera, you can pop the little screen open and you can see if you took a good picture or not, and whether you should be taking another one or in sections or something of that sort. Use your camera as a copy machine. You find pages from a book, you find documents that where you used to use a pencil to take notes, take a picture of it. Take a picture of it with your camera. The documents, the books, whatever. take a picture, and always, whether you're using a camera or a copy machine or whatever, always photograph the title page before you copy the other pages. That way, you'll always know from what the source was that those pages came from. And again, it's so cheap. It is so cheap to take pictures of documents now. And not just in money, although money is a factor, but also time as well. And maybe all you really need from the documents is what you've copied on your camera, and so you just erase them from your camera when you're done. That's possible as well. Now, might be worried about your computer's memory using up so much space because of your photographs, and photographs, even of documents, take up a lot of space. Don't worry about it. Computers have monstrous memories now, and they can store all sorts of things. And as I say, things are about to get even better in that regard. All right, now, you need a program for compiling your family history. And we'll talk about this more in a moment, but you need such a program. And how do you find such a program? You go to a program on your computer like Google, and you type in something like best genealogy programs, and then you comparison shop. And remember, if you've got an Apple Macintosh, you need to buy programs for an Apple Macintosh. If you have a PC, you need programs for a PC. And watch for that as this goes. You absolutely need a cloud program. You need a cloud program. Now, that's it sounds like what is a cloud program? Well, believe it or not, the internet actually began as a cloud program. This is a program where you store all your data files. So you can access this cloud from any computer on Earth that has an internet connection. So all your stuff was on an old computer that doesn't transfer, no problem. On your new computer, just call up your cloud program, and there it all is for you, right there. Now, the biggest problem with cloud programs is that they are so simple to use that people get confused. They're used to things being complicated, but cloud programs were designed to be as simple as possible. Me, when I'm working on my files, I actually work on them in the cloud program, so I don't have to take them out of the cloud. I don't have to put them back into the cloud. Now, what is a cloud program? A cloud program is when you are storing your files in this program, and the program is the files and programs are being protected at an undisclosed location, probably in Bulgaria or something like that. But in a nice, safe site somewhere. In fact, as I said, that's why the Pentagon developed the internet back in the 1980s. It was to store all of this stuff off, so all the computers would not be in one place. It could be nuked. All this stuff could be saved. So by all means, get a cloud program. Many of these cloud programs will give you free space up to a point. And there are many of them. Some for Apple PCs, some for PCs as such. Programs like iCloud and Dropbox. But even when you have to pay for it, a cloud program is very inexpensive. And if your computer should crash, all you've lost is the computer, not the stuff that you're storing on it, not the stuff. Or your computer is stolen, or you find yourself in the middle of Bulgaria or somewhere, and you just happen to run into a cousin who has your family tree, and you've got to find your family tree. You just get to the nearest computer, access your cloud program, and there you've got it to share with your cousin, and you can link your family up. However, having said that, you have to accept the fact that I'm a bit old school. And so anything worth saving on your computer is worth saving in paper. It's worth making a paper copy. Now, I'm not saying make a paper copy of everything, but I am saying make a paper copy of what is important to you, and then carefully file it away where you can find it. And I recommend, as far as storage goes, people ask me, should you use a filing cabinet? What do you use? I use plastic blanket boxes that I buy at Walmart. And these are wonderful. You can store your files in them. They have a lid. If there's a flood or your house is blown away or whatever, the papers are protected from insects and water and all of this. And if you need to move them from someplace, a blanket box, which is about this big, is easy to transport. Easy to transport. Oh, they stack very well too, I should add. Okay, also cloud programs protect you from ransomware. They protect you from ransomware. Now let me explain about that. This is where some awful person has hacked your computer and is holding your files hostage. This happened to me one time. And what did I do? I went to another computer. I contacted Dropbox. I told them what had happened and when it had happened. And then some bored person at Dropbox said, no problem. They pushed a couple of buttons and all my files were just fine. You see, they store 30 days of your files and programs and such on a cloud program. So I just had them restore the files before the ransomware attack. Didn't end up paying anybody anything. And if you work for an institution or something that's concerned about ransomware, tell them to keep everything in clouds. They're not going to have a problem. They're not going to have a problem. However, it is also a good idea to have a program to protect you from being hacked. And that Norton is the most popular of these programs. But again, go on Google and comparison shop. What is the best program for protecting your computer for the money? For the money. Now, whenever you are buying anything on a computer, use a low amount credit card. A low amount credit card. So if somebody should ever hack, say, Amazon's accounts or whomever you're buying from over the internet, all they've got is your low account credit card, and that's not going to get them anywhere. By the way, that's a good trick when you're traveling as well. Do your charging on a low account credit card or money card, as it is, and you can get these just about everywhere. And keep the amount of money on the card at a minimum. I mean, except when you're buying something, of course. And this way, you can't be robbed for very much. Something that is really, really cool, something that's really, really cool on the internet is that there are private companies and there's also software that you can buy if you really want to try your hand at this. If you've got old photographs or old photographs that are badly damaged or have holes in them and whatever, there are private companies that can restore the photographs, not to as good as they were, but to better than they were. Particularly if you're dealing with something like those ancient old tintypes and such, which were pretty lousy to begin with, you can hire a company to do that. Something that was popular 20 or 30 years ago was, it's grandma's and grandpa's 50th wedding anniversary or something. And so, excuse me. So what you do is you get a picture of each of them when they were young, and then you Photoshop them in there together. And that was very popular. On the upper right on our illustration here is one of the most famous faked photographs of all time. Abraham Lincoln and his wife, Mary Todd, were never photographed together. She said, she refused. She said, the two of us together, we look like an exhibit in Mr. Barnum's freak show. But anyway, so as I say, it can be done, and it's often done. An in-law of mine, she could never get my brother-in-law to show up for a group picture or whatever. He always found some excuse to avoid it. And she was threatening to have him photoshopped in, just so she could have a picture of all of them. Now, of course, when you're illustrating your family history and such, you could also go on Google or these other programs, type in whatever you want, then click images, and you can take images of people on flatboats or log cabins or frontiersmen or some character like this one who you might want to represent your relative or something. And so anyway, illustrations are easy to get off the internet. And if you'd like to see an example of it, you've been seeing an example of it in this show. copying and pasting illustrations from Google onto this PowerPoint presentation. Okay. Also, you want to write the great American book, family history, or the great American novel, or the great American something or another. Only problem is you're not Ernest Hemingway. Not a problem. There are plenty of organizations, including Amazon, that for a fee will copy edit your manuscript for all the violations of English grammar or whatever, misspellings, things of this sort, in addition to what's already on your computer. And I think the going rate right now is about $20 for 1,000 words or something like that on that. And in fact, there are companies like Amazon that will take your entire manuscript and help you prepare it as an online book where people can buy it online from Amazon. Lulu does that, and there are other companies and people that will help you with that too, all for a fee, all for a fee. All right, computer databases. Okay. Now there are many different. There's many more types of databases out there on the internet than you and I can even imagine. There are just so many of them, and there's so many of these on so many different subjects. And in doing your family history research, some of these databases, even if they're not genealogy databases, can still help you prove a family story, find information on a famous or an infamous relative, to see if the story is really true, that you are a distant cousin of Millard Fillmore. Why you would want to be a distant cousin of Millard Fillmore, I don't know, but be that as it may. All right, now this, believe it or not, is an important trick that a lot of people using computers do not know, but I'm going to share it with you. All right, let's say that I'm researching James G. Brown, Civil War spy. If all I do is type into Google those words, I will get thousands of hits. I will get every website that has the words James G. Brown, Civil War spy in it, which would be too many sites for even me to go through. However, whenever you put words in your request that are in quotation marks, then the computer reads that as a phrase, not as individual words. So for example, if I redid my request as James G. Brown in quotation marks, and then Civil War in quotation marks, and then I just keep spy over there right there by itself, that will savagely reduce the number of hits. And they're more likely going to be the websites I really want to look at. So use quotation marks anytime when you want words to be read as a phrase, not as a single word. And it's perfectly all right to mix and match phrases and words, individual words. Okay. Now, there are many, many different databases for finding people in the past. Particularly among these are military websites, all sorts of websites on the Civil War, all sorts of websites on individual military units. Your relative was in the Korean conflict, and you know what unit he was in or she was in. Google that unit. You may be pleasantly surprised to find out that they've got a veterans organization. Or your father or grandfather was in World War II. Type in his unit. And again, don't be the least bit surprised if there are websites devoted to that unit. My brother Gus was 3 years old when my stepfather died, and so Gus never knew him. All he had was these stories of his father in World War II. He wrote to the National Personnel Records Board for information, Record Center in St. Louis for information. They sent him back his father's medical record, which gave his father's squadron. My brother went online, searched for that squadron, found a ton of information on that squadron, including photographs and memories from members of the squad. It was just wonderful. And the same can be true of your relative who served in Vietnam, who served in Korea, who served in World War II. And all the more important because of the fire in 1974 that destroyed so many military personnel records this can make up for it to some degree. Okay. All right. Now, some of these sites are free. The greatest of the free genealogy sites is FamilySearch.org. This is put out by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it's put out from their huge library, the world's largest genealogical library, which is in Salt Lake City, Utah. And it is wonderful, and we're going to talk more about it in a few minutes, and I'm going to explain to you some of the secrets to using Family Search. First one is there's books on how to use Family Search, and there's seminars online, free, that will give you ideas on how to use Family Search and all the tricks to it. Okay, others include Find a Grave. I know people who love Find a Grave. I know people who wouldn't contribute anything to anything, but they send money to Find a Grave because Find a Grave is so valuable. But Find a Grave has got millions and millions of tombstones and grave sites across America, and it gets better all the time. And there are so many cemeteries that have been done by Find a Grave. So many cemeteries have been done by it that I'm kind of surprised when I type in a name and the tombstone doesn't come up on the screen for me. Usually there's a photograph of the tombstone, and sometimes the person who photographed the tombstone for you includes a ton of personal information about the deceased. So Find a Grave is wonderful. Oh, and by the way, when you're researching in Family Search will take you to Find a Grave if it links up with that person. Okay, Gen Forum and Gen Web. Gen Forum is a site of local people of local genealogical. They're local people who are running a site on their county or their state or their country. And they will do lookups for you, and they will post queries for you, all sorts of good things. Gen Web, what used to be a site where people left queries under different families. It no longer operates that way, but you can still read Gen Web and see the great information that it contains. There are some sites, however, that require subscriptions. Ancestry.com, for example, Fold 3 is another one. Fold 3 concentrates mainly on National Archives microfilm. As this goes. However, there are many public libraries that provide free public access to such subscription sites as ancestrylibrary.com, Fold 3, and newspapers.com. And I'm sure the B.B. Comer Library does that. And but we'll talk more about that in a moment. So anyway, I always recommend trying out, if you can, try out a site where it's free, like a friend has it, or you're at a public library or something, before you consider buying it. Although these sites are not expensive. They're not expensive. However, they are highly addictive. They are highly addictive. Okay. And again, even for these databases, there are printed books available. Printed books on how to use Ancestry, on how to use Family Search, on how to get the most from these sites. Okay. Many public libraries have their own databases with their own resources, where they've scanned local newspapers, or they put family information, or they put cemetery records or other things. From home, check their website, go to their genealogy department and see what they have got. The Birmingham Public Library has absolutely amazing databases, absolutely amazing, free for the public to use on their website. Okay. Now, even though I understand that this is being broadcast publicly all across the country, let's talk about some of the secrets of these databases. Let's find out what your mother never told you about them. Okay, often documents that are scanned or indexed online are not complete, or they have important related documents that are not mentioned. Never assume that you are getting everything, whatever everything may be. And it is good, if the records are important to you, it is good to try to find out information about the records and learn if there are more like them. Popular genealogy databases often have algorithms that give you different answers to the same query, but especially within the census. Sometimes you even have to use the old ways of accessing the census to find what you need. Now, this happens to everybody. Don't think it's just you, and it's not an urban myth. You go to a site, and we won't name names here. You look up, you pipe in grandpa, you find grandpa in the 1870 census, everything is fine. You go back, you ask in the same program, you put in the same information in the program again, and you can't find him in the 1870 census to save your life. Like I said, the problem is not you, the problem is these programs. Now, I'm fortunate that my office is across the hall from my genealogy library, and we never threw away our old census microfilm and things like that. So we still have the old school ways of doing things. And there are many times I cannot find someone in the census on the computer when I can still find them in the old fashioned way across the hall. If you want an explanation for why that happens, you're going to have to look somewhere else because I honestly do not know. Okay, a really super website for databases is American Ancestors, which I fondly remember as the New England Historic Genealogical Society. Now, do you go to some place like some grand old repository like the Tennessee State Library and Archives, and they've got walls full of these dirty old books on American genealogy in hundreds of volumes. And you just know there's family information on your family in those dirty old books. But there's nothing like an index to them. And you are almost in tears. American Ancestors has been going through these books and scanning them onto their website. Now, you have to be a member. The price is, some people might think the price is a bit steep, but those people have never used this wonderful resource. But anyway, they go all over, the American Ancestors have gone all over the country looking for these monstrous series of books that are not indexed or are indexed or whatever, and putting them onto their database, along with a ton of stuff for your New England ancestors as well. And it is just fabulous, the stuff that you can find there. I might also add that you can contact American Ancestors through their website, and you can hire someone to do your New England research for you in New England. Despite the price of it, I have never been disappointed in the reports they've sent back to me for my New England research. But as I say, it's the whole country. That fabulous genealogical publication, Virginia Genealogist, it is completely scanned onto their website. And it is full of tons of information on people from all over the South who had Virginia roots. Yes, ma'am.
The guy that stopped by my house the other day, and he had been up to a cemetery, and he had taken a picture of a grave marker. And I guess the people were in California or something. And how do they do that? I mean, I know how it goes up there, take a picture, but how would they know to get in touch with that guy so to do it?
Okay, the lady was asking, how do people find local people who will do research for them, or in her particular case, go up to the cemetery and take pictures of the tombstone? First thing I always recommend is contact the local public library. And some of the bigger institutions actually have lists of researchers. My institution, we refer you to Linda Brown. If you call, Linda is there all the time, and she will look up things for you and take pictures of tombstones and cemeteries if you like. But every library has somebody like that who will do research for you. If that doesn't work out for you, try the courthouse, and they may know somebody. It is getting harder and harder to find someone to do research for you. And in some places like New York City, the price may seem to be a bit prohibitive, but then again, you've got to understand it's New York City. It's not Huntsville, Alabama. Okay. But anyway, American Ancestors, the New England Historic Genealogical Society. All right, now let's talk about some of the secrets of specific databases. All right, Ancestry.com has a field marked search. You click on search and you fill out all this wonderful information you have on your ancestors. You press enter and all this wonderful information comes up. What they do not tell you is that they have tons and tons of things on their website that are not searched that way. Now, what you do is you go to, if you're using Ancestry.com, which is belongs to private people, you go to, you click on search, and then you click on catalog. And then under catalog, you type in what kind of records you're looking for. Maybe Coosa County, Alabama records. So you type Alabama and Coosa. And they will show you all the databases that they have, even those that are not accessible by a general search for Alabama and Coosa. Or you might type in Alabama and Civil War, or just plain Alabama in that, just to see what turns up. And as I say, there are a lot of databases. For example, not many, even Cherokee researchers realized that there were two different Dawes rolls, one in 1896 and one in 1898. Ancestry has completely scanned the 1896 Dawes roll and indexed it, but it's not in their general search. You have to click on search and then catalog, and then under catalog, type in Dawes, D-A-W-E-S. And the 1896 records will show up and you can search them there through that search engine. Now, if you're using AncestryLibrary.com, it does things differently. In the upper right-hand corner, it says New Collections. Click on New Collections and then search for the databases you want through New Collections. All right, FamilySearch.org has scanned millions of pages of original local government records. Millions and millions of pages of this. Most of it is accessible to you for free. And more of it will be accessible to you for free in the future. All right. Now, to get there, you first go to FamilySearch.org, which is free. Oh, and by the way, they will require you to register as a member, but that's free, and they will not share your information with anybody without your permission. All right, go to Family Search, then click Search, then click Catalog. And when Catalog comes up, type in where the records are that you want, like Alabama or Gwinnett County, Georgia, or whatever. Never in Family Search, and this is kind of quirky about Family Search, but never in Family Search ever use the words city, county, or parish. Long ago, they just sort of eliminated those from their database. And you'll see why when you use it. But anyway, wherever you put in as a location, a list of the records will show up on the screen. Click on these lists, and if you see a little camera beside the item, that means they've scanned it for you. And you click on the little camera and it comes right up on the screen. Problem, however, is using this microfilm that they've scanned is a little clunky, but don't worry, I'm not going to explain to you how to use it. You'll figure it out for yourself in a few minutes of using it. But anyway, unfortunately, they haven't scanned everything yet, and some of what they've scanned you can only see at an LDS Family History Center. And you can find the nearest LDS Family History Center on their website. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I should have moved this up. All right. Another good use of having a computer in genealogy is finding the living, finding your cousins. You might find cousins out there who have tons of information that they will share with you. Of course, you may find cousins out there who've got tons of information and they will not share it with you. That's sort of the risk that you run. About 4 out of every 5 times I go looking for living descendants, I don't find the living descendants when I find them. The living descendants when I find them know nothing about their ancestry and they have nothing to give me. So how do I respond to that? I print out everything I've got and I send it to them, no strings attached. And I tell you, if you're not going to get useful information from descendants, it's not a bad consolation gift to make somebody's year by sending them their lost family legacy. Well, usually, sometimes it's a legacy they might not want. But we are more accepting these days of colorful characters in our family trees. Okay, anyway, if you do find someone, a descendant, the descendant might have wonderful things as such. I once was researching an historical figure, and I found his only living descendant. And his only living descendant was in California. He was hiding under assumed names and all of this. And when I found him, he said he appreciated what I was doing, but he couldn't help me. He didn't even want to know anything about his family. He said that when he dies, he'll be the last member of the family and the world will be a better place without him. And so I told him I was so sympathetic and sorry, and we parted. A week later, I get a FedEx from him. I opened the FedEx, and here were all these wonderful old pictures. He said, there's a note attached saying, those people you talked about on the phone, I went through grandma's trunk, and here are the photographs of all of them. And one of whom was a founder of American football. And anyway, he said, keep the photos. And he had told me that he had letters from the person I was researching, but he'd sold them for a few dollars at auction a few years back. And he said if I'd called back then, he would have given them to me. A week later, I get a FedEx from him. He says, there's a note attached saying, I forgot that I Xeroxed the letters before I sold them. Here they are. So anyway, the wonderful things you can possibly get from living descendants, as well as sharing information. I've just about come to the conclusion every family has somebody who puts thousands and thousands of people into a database and are only waiting for you to call them up so they can add you and your family to their database as this goes. All right, as this is. Now, funeral notices and obituaries are wonderful ways of finding the living because they usually have, and they are survived by, and they give you the name and location of the people of the survivors. Sometimes you can just simply Google somebody and the obituary will show up, particularly if they didn't die that long ago, the last 10 or 20 years or so. Their obituary or their funeral notice may be free for your access to for you on Google. Sometimes the people who photograph the tombstones for Find a Grave, they will include the obituary or the funeral notice for you as well. Okay, some other places you can do that. If you've got a pretty good idea when grandpa died or grandma died or the person you're seeking, contact the public library of where they died. And the librarians may have the newspaper there and they'll look it up for you. For example, let's say you're researching your ancestor and all you know is that they died on May 22nd, 1924 in Illinois. That sounds hopeless. You contact the Cook County Public Library, that's Chicago, and for free, they will look up and copy the person's funeral notice or obituary for you. And there are other libraries that have similar services. And to me, it's worth it even if I have to pay a few bucks to have it done. All right, now on Family Search, remember that's a free one put out by the Mormon under genealogies. And in the Ancestry sites, that's a subscription site where you have to pay money, or you come to a public library where it's free. They have family charts that people have submitted. Now, people are absolutely right when they say these things contain omissions, they contain mistakes. I even know someone who is complaining that he put his family tree on one of these programs and somebody else went through it and put mistakes in as this goes. Well, that happens too. However, let me say this, mistakes and omissions are not. These charts can be a gold mine in finding a living descendant and eliminating the lines that you follow. And you're saying, well, did they have any children? According to this chart, no, they didn't. It can greatly speed up your process. And a lot of times the information on these charts is right. The the Family Search site has a thing called the IGS, the International Genealogical, well, I can't remember the whole title to it, but the IGS, do not use it. There's a tremendous amount of junk on there. These were often less than honest, the work of less than honest genealogists. And as that goes, but otherwise, these charts are generally reliable. And like I say, they can be a quick path to finding living descendants. Now, let me also throw in a trick there about Ancestry. If you go to a library like this one and use ancestrylibrary.com, you click on the family charts, the genealogy appears there. You've got all this wonderful information. I've got to get in touch with the person who submitted this. You can't. For that, you need a subscription to Ancestry.com. And so go to a friend who has Ancestry.com or subscribe to it yourself. And you will from Ancestry.com, but not Ancestrylibrary.com, you can send a message to this person. Now, they may not answer it. They may not even get it. They may not even be with us anymore. And I've actually seen some people who put their name in there and their email address. They actually put their email address in there to guarantee that you could get in touch with them. All right. There are people on the internet that I refer to as cyber detectives. I know when I say that, you think of Sam Spade in a dark office with a computer terminal. Well, it's something like that, except they're more like very nice people with pocket protectors and lots and lots of computers. But I don't understand why anybody is concerned about privacy anymore, because you don't have any. If you know what you're doing, you can find out pretty much everything you need to know on anybody. But anyway, that's what these people do. And in fact, remember the guy I was telling you about who was under several different names and who provided the wonderful photographs and documents? I found him through a cyber detective. Now, back then that cost a fortune. Today it costs next to nothing to hire a cyber detective. They advertise that they'll help you find your lost love, your old army buddy, your old boyfriend, whatever. What they really mean is they'll help you find the people who owe you money, et cetera, et cetera. But nonetheless, it is they can be extremely helpful. Do understand, however, that much of the information that they peddle out there is out of date. They have ways of finding the information, but not of correcting it as such. And I have found people listed as still living with their old phone numbers and addresses and whatever, and they've been dead for more than 20 years, but it's still showing up in these databases. And if you check out these cyber detective database sites, sometimes even without paying a cent, they give you the information you really need to know. For example, you're typing in somebody and You find, and you know that they're in the state of Alabama, and even from what they give you for free, you find out that they're in Bluntsville, Alabama. Okay, Bluntsville, Alabama is not that big a place. You contact our public librarian, she might be able to tell you where they are. I did that one time with somebody in a little town in Connecticut. And I emailed the librarian saying, I found out that so-and-so lives in your town. I really need to get in touch with her. Do you know her? Can you have her come and get in touch with you? And the librarian types back, she's standing in front of me. And she says, what do you want to know? And it turns out this was a good thing because she did not have a computer. She didn't do email or anything like that. So she gave me the postal address and I mailed her a written letter. All right, so this goes. Zaba Search. I love that name. Zaba Search is a national telephone directory. It's a national telephone directory. Many of the telephone numbers are out of date, particularly with everybody switching to cell phones. And some people are just not there. It's unlisted numbers. But Zaba Search is free and it only takes you 2 shakes of a lamb's tail to use it. And while you're there, you will see advertisements for cyber detectives that you might want to consider trying out. And of course, you can always Google the person you're looking for. And that particularly works if you happen to know where they live or where they should be living. Type in their name, type where you think they live, press enter, and then watch what happens. Watch what happens. You might not only find information on this person, but you could easily get their address, their email address, other useful information. For example, you see them getting some fancy award for supporting their local public library, and then it says, she is the vice director of the so-and-so company here in Heflin, Alabama. You go to the company's website and you send her an email. We had that happen in my program recently. Someone was tearing down an old house and they found a box full of World War II medals and commendations that this soldier had received. And today we are returning those medals and such to his family because I got on Google and I tracked down the living descendants and I found that one of his distant nieces is a secretary at the Arab High School. And I got her on the phone and she gave me the postal address to mail it all to. Okay. All right. Okay, you need a family tree program. Just now, of course, the question arises first, do you really need a computer? Well, a lot of genealogy has been done without computers, but why wouldn't you want a computer? And this is one of the best reasons. Family tree program is a program where you type your family information into the computer. Once you've typed it into the computer, you can push a couple of buttons and print it out, and you get a nice printed report with an index and everything. You can type the sources in. You can add photographs. You can add music. When you went out and interviewed your Aunt Maud about the family, you turned the video camera on your cell phone on, and you videoed the whole and recorded, of course. You fully recorded the whole interview. You can put that entire interview on the site. So you click on Aunt Maud, and here she is on the screen for you, telling you the family stories. It's like something out of those Harry Potter novels where the people in the newspaper pictures talk to you. And of course, when you finally put all this information together and you thoroughly proofed it, you can push a few buttons and you can print the whole thing out as a family history. We recently bought some family histories, and all the person did was all this information they had compiled, they just printed it out as a book and they sold it on Amazon. Anyway, these are a couple of screens. Now, one of the most important reasons for putting your information on a family tree program. One of the most important reasons for this is to keep your information organized. Many years ago, I received a phone call from my very distant cousin, Aubrey Morris, Atlanta radio celebrity. And Aubrey was on the phone. He said, Bob, all the Haygood family, every branch of the Haygood family has a family history except ours. And I'm about to publish ours. And so I know that you descend from Thomas Hogwood through, and then he gives off what he thought was my family tree. And I said, Aubrey, you've got it wrong. I descend from Thomas Hogwood through, and then I read it, I gave it to him over the phone, and he was amazed. He said, you knew all of that off the top of your head. Well, I am a genealogist. The truth is I had turned on the computer and I was reading it off the screen to him. And I said, I tell you what, let me crank up the computer and I'll email you a copy of it. He said, would you do that so I can put it in the book? Certainly, Aubrey, for you, anything. And of course, that's exactly what I did. And it's in the final Haygood, monster Haygood family history as this goes. All right, anyway, other things you can do. You're going on a research field trip. You can print out your family tree and take that with you. Now you're saying, wait a minute, I'm bringing my laptop computer with me or I'm bringing my cell phone with me. Believe it or not, there are people out there who do all of this now on their cell phone. They don't even own a formal computer. They just do it on their cell phone. My fingers would never allow that. But anyway, some people are that adept at it. But anyway, but even if you're bringing your laptop, and again, excuse me for being old school on that, but that's just me. But anyway, I prefer when I go to a library to research one family and I stumble into something on another family, on a completely other family, I like having my information on paper where I can touch it and I can see it and I can scribble notes on my paper copy. Also, many libraries like the Southern History of the Birmingham Public Library and my library at Wallace State have family folders where you can put you can search for family information. And if you printed out your family, you can stick them in the family folders with your name and address, of course, on it. Always, by the way, when you leave a query or something like that, leave your name and your address and put your name and address on it, on that. Email addresses can be a bit of a problem because people will change email addresses over time. But believe it or not, there are computer programs out there where anytime you give everybody one email address and whatever you change it to, you can change it on the computer so they can still use that old address and always find you and always connect to the new email address that you are using. There are some, you can also send your family tree to relatives as attachments to emails. Like that cousin, you know the one I'm talking about, the one who never married, never had kids, was an only child, and yet they've assembled 20,000 of their cousins in their computer. You can send them your branch of the family, and they'll send you the whole database for free. But we can do all of this electronically. You can also sometimes print out your family tree. On some of these programs, you can print out your family tree as a fancy chart. And these make wonderful Christmas presents, especially if you stop by a big office supply store and you get some really nice paper and you've got a color printer. And some of these charts will print, some of these computer programs will print out your family in these pretty charts. And you can even add photographs and things like that. But then you talk about the Christmas gift for somebody who has everything. Oh, and you might print out the whole family tree as a report and include that with the fancy chart, if you would. And if you want a really fancy chart like those that you see on Finding Your Roots, you know, at the end of the show, Dr. Henry Louis Gates gives them, there are companies on the internet that will provide you with that too, all the way back to Charlemagne or Eve or Lucy or whoever's you think your family begins with back there. Okay. And again, comparison shop for genealogy family tree programs. I use Roots Magic, but I've been using it since it was Family Origins 2, way back when, and I still love it today, and I will always love it, and I'm just painfully loyal. However, I think Legacy is now the #1 PC program, and it is a first-rate program, and they will give you a dummy version of it to practice on to see if you would like it too. A lot of really good genealogy programs are out there, and they're not expensive. They're not expensive. All right, one of the most amazing things to have happened in recent times has been newspapers online. Millions and millions of pages of newspapers, millions and millions of pages of newspapers scanned, and you can do word searches of them. Now, sometimes the word searches will not turn up everything. Sometimes the newspapers you really need to search haven't survived or have not been scanned. Sometimes the ink was too broken or whatever. But the thing of it is, I never dreamed when I first started this many years ago that the day would come where I could type in a name and millions of pages of newspapers would be searched for who I'm looking for. Now, you come from a county where the newspapers probably haven't survived. The newspapers have certainly not been scanned. Search these sites anyway, and you can still be pleasantly surprised. Interesting articles were reprinted all the time back then. And for example, I gave a talk one time to my local historical society back home, and we had this story that when the Civil War broke out, our neighbors raised the United States flag in protest to secession. And I searched for that story in the newspapers of the time for years, and I'd gotten nowhere. I knew it was in the papers because there were stories denouncing the story, but nobody reprinting the story. Anyway, for my talk for that night, I was going to say, this is the stuff that I found on newspaperarchive.com. And one of the things I hit was this obscure little Massachusetts newspaper that reprinted the story of the flag raising, among many other things as well. Okay, there are 2 bibliographies of newspapers that are available online. Both of these are free, and we have them on our screen here. The Library of Congress is Chronicling America, and Wikipedia. Anyway, you go there, you go by state, then you go by city, and then they will show you the newspapers that have been scanned. Newspapers that have been scanned. Some of the sites that have scanned the newspapers are free. Also, by the way, ask your local the appropriate local public library what of their newspapers have been scanned, what have survived and what have been scanned. And of course, sometimes they'll say, well, none of them have been scanned, but we've got every one of them in the back room if you want to look. And that has field trip written all over it. And by the way, unless you're talking about Boston or New York or someplace like that, going through old newspapers can be done fairly quickly. It's very easy to scan through the stories and find things. Okay, now, some of the newspaper websites are free, such as Chronicling America and Georgia Historic Newspapers. I love Georgia Historic Newspapers, which is ran by the Digital Library of Georgia, which has millions and millions and millions of pages of Georgia newspapers scanned on there. And you do word searches and you find the most wonderful things. Other states have also scanned their newspapers, including California, Colorado, and New York. Several popular subscription newspapers. Okay, now there are also sites that scan newspapers, but they require you to buy a subscription to them, not to the newspaper, but to the site. One of the very first of these was newspapersarchives.com, really good. Genealogybank.com, also very good. And newspapers.com. Now, newspapers.com includes all of the newspapers on microfilm at the Alabama Department of Archives and History, which used to have up to 1923, they used to have a very extensive newspaper collection. I mean, they had a regular program for microfilming newspapers. And this is what the program did before it shut down. Okay. As this is. But these are all subscription sites for which you must pay a monthly subscription fee to use them. Okay. Many public libraries, including Southern History of the Birmingham Public Library, have free access to at least some of newspapers.com. The Birmingham Public Library has newspapers.com for the Southern United States. And like I said, you can use that for free there. All right, there are big academic libraries. For those who want everything, there are big academic libraries like the Woodruff Library at Emory University that have databases of the 18th century newspapers and 19th century newspapers. But these are for the serious, in-depth scholar. They also have databases for old British newspapers as well. All right, DNA research. Now, we could spend all the rest of the afternoon talking about DNA research, but what we're going to do is confine it to how we use it on computer. All right, first off, to really do DNA research, you must use your DNA, like that wonderful scene in Jurassic Park where the park owner is pricked by himself and he explains it's a miracle of DNA that makes dinosaurs. Okay, there are many different companies that will do your DNA for you. Ancestry, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, etc. I use Family Tree DNA. Comparison shop on the internet. That's right, you can even comparison shop for DNA organizations. Find out from people who've used them which is the best one for you and gives you the most bang for the buck. Now, there's all sorts of things you can learn from DNA, and it gets better all the time, but we don't have time for that here. But always remember this, the information that you get from DNA is circumstantial, incomplete, sometimes wrong, always suspect, and will get better with time. Even if your DNA test confirms the story Grandma always told you about your great-grandmother was a Cherokee princess, you can't fully trust that because the Cherokee DNA databases are not that complete, so it could be a false positive. Anything DNA gives you could be a false positive. Even if you've got a 93% match, remember that means there's a 7% chance it's a false positive. So always keep that in mind. It's a wonderful tool for many reasons. It can answer questions for you you thought would never be answered. But on the same way, it can also lead you down the wrong path. In the last few years, I've been contacted by 3 different people who the DNA test showed that they were my first or second cousins. I just do not see how that is physically possible from the DNA. I mean, they're not even from the same region I come from. Okay. GEDmatch, that is a database on the internet. Now, when you take your 23andMe and whatever test you take, they give you a number. And you can load this number into GEDmatch. And GEDmatch will then compare your DNA to the largest database of DNA in the world and share information with you. And they will give you a GEDmatch number. Now, what are you going to do with your GEDmatch number? You can go on the internet. You can go on social media to family sites. Let's say the Crawford clan. There's actually a Crawford clan DNA site. And you go on that and you give them your GEDmatch number and they will run it through all their Crawford DNAs and show you what line of Crawfords you belong to and how you probably descend, which is wonderful. Now, when you use GEDmatch, you can do it anonymously, and there's a good reason for that. The police have been using these DNA tests to catch bad people. Unfortunately, they've also captured innocent people too. That's the story they don't tell you on Bloodlines. That, again, false matches, things of this sort, innocent people being persecuted. And there are some people who do not want to do their DNA because they are terrified that the police are going to arrest them or somebody close to them for something they may have done. Well, I don't really want to get into that. But one of the nice things about GEDmatch is, as they say, you can do it anonymously. So there's no way the police can trace it back to you without a court order. And I really don't think they're going to get very far with that. Okay. There are many, many books available on genealogy and DNA and what it's all about and what it can do for you. There are also many sites on the internet that can explain it to you in great detail. And many of those sites are free. Like computers, DNA can become a greater interest than the genealogy that first brought you to DNA. All right. All right, let's talk about federal records. All right, the National Archives and Records Administration has many guides on its website that will explain federal records to you. Federal military records, census records, Native American records, immigration records. They have forms that you can fill out to order a record on a specific individual rather, such as federal land records or Civil War service records or something of that sort. They will not, however, search through their records for a specific individual for you. You need to hire someone or go to the National Archives yourself to look for it, but they will otherwise answer your questions and your forms. The Bureau of Land Management, the BLM, has well indexed and extensive records of lands in the federal land states like Alabama. Now, every state in the United States is either a federal land state or it's not. And the chart you see on the map you see on the screen, that illustrates it. The gray states are not federal land states. That means you must go to the state archives for the land records. The blue states, including Alabama, they are federal land states, and you have to contact the Bureau of Land Management. The Bureau of Land Management has put millions of their records online, and this is fabulous stuff. I particularly like their track books. I've cracked some important cases with that. Now, the National Archives also has federal land records, and it is a good thing if you know where the location of the land is using the federal land system and the name of the person to contact the National Archives and see if there's letters and correspondence relating to that tract of land. A friend of mine who uses this much more often than I do says that about 1 out of every 5 times he digs into the federal land records, he finds something spectacular on the person who was filing for the land. And I will take 1 in 5 any day in research. Okay. The National Archives also has regional archives. For the southern United States, that would be the National Archives at Atlanta, which is in Morrow, Georgia, across the parking lot from the Georgia Archives building. Now, these, for our research, are most valuable for the federal court records, but always contact the National Archives at Atlanta or any National Archives branch you're going to visit. Always contact them ahead of time to tell them what you're looking for so that they can search and make sure that those records have survived. And in some cases, the records are actually indexed, and they can check the index and let you know if it's going to be worth a trip for you. Okay, maps. All right. There are many wonderful free map sites on the internet. I like Acme Mapper because Acme Mapper is a free site that will take you anywhere around the world, anywhere on earth you want to go. And it will show you topographical maps and satellite photos and all sorts of wonderful things. On Acme Mapper, as that goes. You Google Earth. Google Earth is also free. And if you know how to use Google Earth, and there are books on using Google Earth, you can actually draw up maps to show the locations of historic sites relating to your family, things of this sort, as they appear on a modern satellite photo. And Google Maps, all of those are free. The Library of Congress has free maps, and they're well worth taking a look at, their maps division. And the Library of Congress not only has free maps, but when they put the maps on the internet, they make them high quality maps. So you can press a button and download it into your computer, and you have a beautiful high grade map that you can make prints of and things of this sort, publish, things like that. All right, Alabama is one of those states, where somebody has tried their best to scan and put on the internet all the historical maps that they could. Dr. W. Greg Remington of the University of Alabama, he created the site Alabama Maps, which is free. Okay, now you go to that site and it includes all the maps of the world-class collection of the University of Alabama, the Birmingham Public Library, and the Alabama Department of Archives and History. You can search the maps by city, by county, statewide maps as well. They have Sanborn fire insurance maps. This is a lower corner there. That's a Sanborn fire insurance map. The Sanborn agents in the late 1800s and early 20th century, they went through many towns, 114 of them in Alabama, and they drew every building in the town and the floor plan and marked what kind of a fire hazard they were. Grandma's always talking about the old family house that stood on the corner of so-and-so, and you don't have a photograph of it, although check with the local historical society and public library in case they do. And maybe you can find a diagram of it on a Sanborn fire insurance map. Oh, and better than that, get a copy of the map and take it to grandma and let her reminisce about all the buildings, who lived where, and what life was like back then. Anyway, I can't say enough good things about Alabama Maps, including, did I mention it's free? That it is free. It is a wonderful site. It is a wonderful site. All right, the Perry Castanada collection is a similar free collection of maps, and it is put together by the University of Texas, bless their hearts. And it is a world-class collection of maps, including federal topographical maps, old ones, things of this sort, really, really good. And then finally, there is Map Geek. Again, with maps, you can get so buried in it, you forget the genealogy that brought you there. But Map Geeks is a free site about free maps and where you go to find them. Okay. Oh, thanks to COVID, and that's about the only thing I can thank COVID for. More and more stuff has been put on the internet than ever before. More and more has been done that way. Okay, and many of these presentations are available on YouTube. But you type in genealogy videos, and you'll be just overwhelmed by all the free videos that are out there on how to research your family and the things of it, including the presentation that we're doing today. The B.B. Comer Library has been putting all of these presentations on YouTube, free for everyone to use, free for any of them to use. Now, if you are involved in a live presentation, a meeting or a speaker or whatever, and they're going to be there, you're going to be there, you're going to be watching it live. You can have a microphone and you can ask the person live questions. However, if you don't have a microphone or you don't want to go to that kind of trouble, as with this presentation, you can type in a question and the MC will ask the person speaking your question. And this allows us to go to presentations in distant places we would never have thought of before. All right, the Truckee Meadows Community College Library. Like our collection at Wallace State, they're a community college with a genealogy program. And their genealogy librarian contacts speakers all over the country, and they do presentations from their offices and homes, or send some PowerPoint presentations like what we're using here, and on the widest variety of subjects. So click into their site and see what all they have available for us in genealogy presentations. All right. One of the biggest problems, and it's not really entirely the internet's fault, but one of the biggest problems with the internet and computers is that people now do their genealogy at home by computer or even off their cell phone, and they don't visit libraries and archives anymore. Last few weeks, I've been visiting one library and archives after another. I was at the Alabama Department of Archives and History just before I came here. If I was their only customer today, I would not be surprised. People just don't visit libraries and archives anymore. And that's a real shame because there's a lot of stuff there that is not on the internet, and some of it, I suspect, never will be on the internet, or if it was, you would not be able to access it. Anyway, brick and mortar archives and libraries can be contacted through their respective websites. You can ask them questions. You can check their catalog and see if they have manuscripts and books relating to your family. Often libraries have special sources on their sites that are huge research tools. Southern History of the Birmingham Public Library is an excellent example. They have fabulous databases that they made up themselves for their library. Okay, now, also it is a good idea to visit brick and mortar libraries to personally see what they have and to meet with the librarians and to discuss your problems. Librarians can always suggest other sources that you can visit. You go to the Mobile Public Library and you're working with them all day long and they're finding you all this wonderful stuff. And finally, at the end of it's nearly the end of the day, and the archivist says, "Is there anything more you can tell us about your family where we could help you?" And you say, "Well, my great-grandmother was a nurse here in Mobile, and in 1948, she was the Mardi Gras queen." Why didn't you tell us that to begin with? Here in Mobile, we have the Mardi Gras Museum and Archives, which has her dress and all these wonderful photos of when she was Mardi Gras queen. And when she was a nurse, we have our medical museum here in Mobile with its archives of all the medical professionals who've ever worked here in Mobile. And the hospital she worked at will be photographed. She might even be in some of the photos as this goes. As I always say about librarians know where the bodies are buried, especially the Fort Payne Public Library, which is in the middle of the city cemetery. Okay, but anyway, anytime you visit a library, be sure to ask about the vertical files. The Southern History of the Birmingham Public Library has fabulous vertical files on families, particularly of the Jefferson County area. We have vertical files in my library at Wallace State, but you can find tons of information that people have provided on that. Tons of information people have provided. Now, if you are going to visit a library, always go to the website to find out if the library is open and if there are special requirements. Currently, because of COVID, at the National Archives at Atlanta, you have to email them ahead of time and tell them what day and time you are coming. Otherwise, there's not going to be somebody there to unlock the door for you and let you in to see the records. And of course, if you have my luck, if you don't call ahead and check ahead, you're going to find out that the library this is the week everybody in the library goes on vacation. And, or this is the week they do inventory or whatever. And in fact, it's not a bad idea to email the librarians and tell them that you're coming and what you are coming for. And they might be able to provide you with some useful information in that regard. And of course, librarians are also important for other important information, like where to park, where to stay, and most importantly, where to eat and where to avoid eating at. And for the audience here, that is not my office and that's not my library at Wallace State. That is Southern History at the Birmingham Public Library with its beautiful WPA murals. And that's the reading room of the Library of Congress. Okay. Now, let's say you want to research you want a global look at your family. Not, maybe the DNA test have encouraged you to do this, but you want, or you know the name of your immigrant ancestor and where you believe your immigrant ancestor came from. All right, Brigham Young University Center for Family History and Genealogy. It is a great place full of helpful information. You can contact them on the internet. They've got all these wonderful guides to doing family history. So does Family Search, by the way, also has many handouts free online on how to research different groups. In particular, at their great Mormon library in Salt Lake City, where they have microfilm from all over the world on families. The best global site is a subscription site called MyHeritage. Although Ancestry and Family Search also cross international borders. Okay. One Great Family is particularly good if you've got characters in your family tree or problematic ancestors or ancestors who are just not fitting in the normal frame of things, if you would. For English, Irish, and Welsh research, there is Genes Reunited, which sounds like a soccer team, and Find My Past. And Find My Past, I believe, is free. Last year, I was involved in several projects involving Revolutionary War era French and Dutch people. And I fell in with GenaNet. And it is absolutely fabulous for French, Belgian, and Dutch genealogy. But it was just a super site and was a huge help to me in that. And as I say, if you just Google that you're looking for Italian genealogy or Dutch genealogy or Ghanaian genealogy or Jamaican genealogy, all these wonderful sites and handouts will come up on the screen. Okay, other sites for genealogy, The social media. Facebook has all sorts of family sites. Also, all these wonderful sites for ethnic research, Italian research, African-American research, Hispanic research, whatever you're looking for. They have sites on Facebook for that. And of course, Facebook is free. And on these wonderful sites, whatever problems you're having, you're just a beginner and you don't know anything about Argentinian research. You've been at it a while and you've taken your family, your Canadian ancestors as far as you think you can. You can put questions on there. You can put families on there. I've seen where somebody said, I must have every single scrape of information on blah, 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 who lived in blah, 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 blah. And then the next thing you know, you've got 80 different responses there from people who said, well, you don't have this, and you don't have that, and I bet you don't have this, and on and on. But you can find the most wonderful, and of course, you can find living descendants that way too. Okay. Now, these are some very special sites. These sites were not, by and large, designed for genealogists. but for researchers in general, and they are still fabulous. They're still fabulous. And there are things you need to know about. First off, WorldCat. WorldCat. WorldCat is a book catalog and it's free. You go to WorldCat and you type in where you live. Then you type in a book you are looking for. Now, if one of their member libraries has that book, if any of their member libraries have that book, they will list for you the libraries that have those books, that book, in the order of which one is closest to you in miles. And it's just absolutely wonderful. Now, unfortunately, our book collection at Wallace State in Hansville is not on WorldCat, but all Alabama public libraries are, and almost all university libraries are as well. Now, if the book you're looking for is not specifically a genealogy book, you can probably borrow it on interlibrary loan through your local public library. However, there is a genealogical library in Independence, Missouri, called the Mid-Continent Public Library, in St. Louis. In Independence, Missouri. They have a huge genealogy collection, and unlike any other library, they will loan their books on interlibrary loan. So if you're looking for a specific book that way, maybe it's there. Also, I might add, when you go to Family Search, you do search, you click on catalog. You also get the books that are available from the Mormons, and some of those books have been scanned onto the internet where you could read them at home. But anyway, WorldCat will help you locate the books, and then your interlibrary loan librarian will find the books for you and get them to you. That is, if you don't want to make a drive to Nashville or to Birmingham Public Library or Wallace State to see the book. Okay, Archive Grid is like WorldCat, except Archive Grid is for private manuscript collections. And most big university and state archives, their manuscript collections are on Archive Grid. Now, obviously, this material is not going to be available in interlibrary loan, but at least you know where it is. You can contact that state archives or that university special collection and see about getting a copy of the documents. And if they won't copy them for you, like I said, field trip. Think of field trips. JSTOR. JSTOR does not stand for anything. But what it means is this is a huge collection of scholarly journals, local historical journals, state historical journals, things like this that have been scanned onto the internet. Most of it is free. At least to read it on your screen. And there's tons and tons of good genealogical data on that. HathiTrust. HathiTrust is one of the great secrets of the internet. HathiTrust has scanned millions and millions of books onto the internet. You can search all of these books at one time. And then within individual books, you can read the specific pages, usually where the name appears. So just like with the newspaper databases, you were reading through millions of newspapers at the speed of light. With HathiTrust, you're reading through millions of books at the speed of light. Do what, ma'am? It's free. It's on the internet. Yes, ma'am, HathiTrust. You just type in Google HathiTrust. Yeah, just Google HathiTrust and away you go. But do read the instructions. And Google Books, by the way, Google Books does much of the same thing. All right, the Periodical Resource Index. The Periodical Resource Index, or PERSI, is put together by the Allen County Fort Wayne Public Library, which is the second largest genealogical library in the world. Second largest genealogical library in the world. Okay. And it is a giant catalog to articles that have been published in genealogical journals, starting with the very first genealogical journal in 1847. Now, they're a few years behind, but it is just a wonderful site. You type in your rare family name, Hammondtree, and you discover that the Hammondtree Family Bible was published in the Tri-Swamp Genealogical Society Quarterly in 1948. And aside from the obvious, contacting the Tri-Swamp Public Library or something, you can also contact the Allen County Fort Wayne Public Library, and for a reasonable fee, they will copy the article for you. They will copy the article for you. Now, it is impossible to keep up with all of this. I wish it was somebody's job just to all day keep up with all of this and let us know what all is happening and what all they're discovering. I really wish it was. The other day I was looking for something else, and what should I stumble into? But the Digital Public Library of America, which I've never heard of, which has hundreds of millions of images, documents, other important things, all name searchable. And anyway, it's not on your handout because, like I said, I discovered it only yesterday. But I wanted to be sure to mention it. The Digital Public Library of America, which is somewhat similar to Google Scholar, which is also another great site. All right. Okay, now let's get some questions from the floor. And don't be bashful about your questions. You were saying about Native Americans? Oh, absolutely. The gentleman was asking about Native American records. All the tribes have websites. There are all sorts of websites for each tribe on how to do research, how to understand the heritage and background. Ancestry.com, AncestryLibrary.com. They have a number of Native American databases, such as the Dawes Rolls of the 5 Civilized Tribes. There's tons of stuff out there. Everything is out there, however. At Wallace State, we have a very good Native American collection, and I recommend coming and using it as well. But one of the real beauties of these Native American websites on the internet is that there are people who've done the research. You can tell them what you've got, and then they can tell you what you need to do next, because they've been there. They've probably been there several times, and they can give you sound advice on. But one thing you have to watch out for is that some of these sites are ran by crackpots. And but I mean, that should become obvious. Quite often, Native American tribes are reluctant, the tribes themselves are reluctant to help people. The Cherokees, for example, are overwhelmed every day by requests from people who said, well, my grandmother was a Cherokee princess or something like that. And they can't help any of these people, much less all of them. And then there are some people who are researching their Native American roots for the worst reasons. They want to be a member of an oppressed minority. They want a small business loan. They want to send their kids to college on Native American, most of which, by the way, is a pipe dream. The United States government spends more money on the average rich old white man than they spend on the poorest Native American babies. The Indians have been treated very badly throughout our history. They continue to be treated very badly today, despite the fact the American people as a whole support the Native Americans. The government, though, has not been so brought around. That was a good question. And by the way, send me an email and I'll send you some of our handouts on Native American research. Well, his Native American ancestor did not sign up for Dawes, which generally were Native Americans who were living in Oklahoma. However, she may still have signed up for the Guion Miller claims. And I'll explain about those in my handouts, but send me an email. I'll send you our Native American handouts on that. And if you send me some details about your problem, maybe we can offer some suggestions. Some more good questions. More good questions. Yes.
This is specific. I have ancestry. I can't get any farther, but it's been rumored throughout town. Gabriel Moss. He had a mother who was part Native American. And Pickett's family.
Yeah, which what you're talking about is very credible. Okay, the lady has got a problem. Her story goes that her ancestor had a Native American mother and lived in Northwest Georgia, somewhere above Atlanta, all of which is very possible because there are many Cherokee and even some Creek settlements in that area. And this is not a talk on Native American research, but what I always tell people is first forget the Indian and just do your basic family history and pretend you never heard a story of the Indians and follow that as far as you can. Then when you've done all the research, then what you do is you start reading the books and going to the libraries that on the Native American research. You present them with your facts and you see what they can do. Now, there's a thing called Bob Davis's rule of red, white, and black. The red is that even if your native ancestor was Native American, you may never be able to prove it, even with DNA. The white is to remember that a lot of white people who were dark-skinned told people that there are many white people who have so-called Caucasians, who have dark skin, and people just presume they had Indians in their background when they didn't. A good friend of mine once asked me, what are Native American features? And I said, like my grandmother. They tend to be short, high cheekbones, dark skin, oil slick black eyes, and oil slick black straight hair. And she looked at me and she said, you just described my grandmother who came here from Yugoslavia in 1924. So that's a problem. And then the black is that many people today with African American ancestry prefer to remember their African American ancestors as Indians. Or maybe that's the way the family remembered them. And I once had, many years ago, when I was a private researcher, I encountered 3 cases of that in 1 week. In fact, there were some prominent African American researchers in genealogy who argue that all these stories of grandma being a Cherokee princess, she was really African American. I'm sorry, I can't buy into that. I've seen too much, but I do understand where it comes from. And in some cases it can well be true. I did one of the first DNA tests ever to find Native American ancestry. And through my father, and it was a complete failure. And I've tried since, and it's been a complete failure. I've got a mountain of research that says my ancestor Dempsey Tyner was Native American, and even that his grandfather was African American. But the problem is he's so far back in the family tree and has crossed his sexes so many times that the current DNA test could easily miss it. But as they say, DNA tests will get better as time goes on.
They came from York County, South Carolina.
Okay, you said they came from York County, South Carolina. Have you looked at the Catawbas? The Catawbas still have a reservation there. And they're South Carolina's great old historical Native American family. And we have a thick file on them at Wallace and a book or two on them as well. I want to thank you all for being a wonderful audience.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Davis, for the wonderful presentation. We certainly appreciate you for doing this series, so thank you.
You're very welcome.
So if we've got questions, we call you at Wallace State College, huh?
Well, I prefer you didn't call, but send me an email. You see, I can't send you an attachment on a phone call.